It's a brand new morning with what is possibly some of the most spectacular scenery that I have seen in a long time. We've got salt pans on this side, salt flats on this side, and it is really beautiful, especially since we just saw the sun come up a few minutes ago. Now, yesterday we spent a lot of time eating some phenomenal food and a lot of dessert, and we really did stuff our tummies to the max. Today though, we're going to do things a little differently, get a little more serious. Today we're going to go and visit some offbeat places that you might not normally stop when you're traveling across the country. And yes, finally today we are going to go to the shoreline, because yesterday we've barely seen the coast at all.
Our first stop, the brand new roll-on, roll-off or Ro-Ro ferry terminal in Goga in Gujarat. Although not operational completely just yet, we did get a chance to have complete unrestricted look around the terminal and the little bridge that would lead right up to the ferry.
Now this of course is the small ferry that is currently operating, and it does this trip twice a day, leaves here at 11 and 5 in the evening. This of course won't be the RO or the roll-in roll-out ferry that will be operational in January. That will of course be a much larger vessel. That is because cars and trucks do both have to go on board, and that clearly isn't big enough for a car. Now this is, as I mentioned earlier, a great experience. It's a great family experience too. It's a great experience for anybody who's never been on one of these, and I highly recommend it, because driving your car directly into a boat and then running across the bay and driving straight off is really a cool, once-in-a-lifetime thing that you can enjoy.
What an absolutely stunning experience, and I personally can't wait to come back when the massive car ferry is finally operational.
Now, as you've probably noticed by now, we've been driving the new Dzire on our exploration of Gujarat trip. Now, the one we have is the petrol automatic, which gets the same 1.2 litre engine that the last generation Swift Dzire got, and a whole bunch of other cars get as well. Now, the engine is mated to a 5-speed AMT gearbox, which means that underneath all of that electronics is still the same 5-speed manual that everybody is so used to and everybody loves.
And now onto the part of the drive that I am looking forward to the most. A small town on the Gujarat coast, Alang, is where ships come to die. And not just from India, from everywhere in the world. It is, without a question of doubt, the shipbreaking capital of the world. Alang is so bittersweet. It does give a second lease of life to so many artifacts, and of course, all that scrap metal is put to reuse. And for that, it deserves an overall indulgence score too. A solid 8 on 10 from me. As we move from Alang, we encounter some of the worst roads we have seen on the journey so far. But the Dzire just keeps on trotting. And in a way, I am glad that this is an automatic, and that just makes my life so much easier and the drive so much more relaxed.
And last but not the least, I have developed renewed respect for that engine under the bonnet. It is surprisingly smooth, surprisingly powerful, and my favorite, it sounds great. Now, all of that is great when you have a truck in front of you in the lane blocking you for the last 5 minutes, and when you find that little opening like we just have and you shift down and you want to overtake.
But just once in a while, it is good to stop and take a breather especially if you're in the middle of nowhere and you come across signboards like this.
Now, driving across rural Gujarat, you're very likely to come across boards like that warn you about wildlife crossing. And while you're very unlikely to see a lion or lioness or their cubs, and you're more likely to see a bunch of cows and goats running across the highway, it is a grim reminder of how, for the betterment of mankind, for our convenience, which in this case is the new road that's being built right next to the old one, we are invading on their territory.
And although we didn't see a lion, we did manage to see the majestic nilgai. In my opinion, one of the most underrated wild animals that our subcontinent has to offer. And yes, it did cross the road, and yes, we did respect its place and gave it as much space as we possibly could. After all, we were in its habitat and not the other way around. What magnificent creatures indeed, and personally, this little experience makes me give an indulgence score of a solid 10 on 10. The drive from Alang to Diu is quite straightforward, but we do wish the roads were better. Clearly, this part of Gujarat hasn't had that magic touch yet. And once in a while you are greeted and treated with vistas like these. It was time to get back into the Dzire and check out some of the local sites like this absolutely stunning and well-lit church of St. Thomas, and of course the beach, our final endpoint for this lovely road trip.
And so we finally made it to the end of our epic little adventure, and trust me when I say this, it was impromptu. I genuinely did not know what I was doing at Surat airport the other day. Now, we've talked about the indulgence score all this trip, so let me recap it for you. Food, let's start with my favorite. We've had some great dishes, and for example, that Shrikhand is going to remain etched in my memory for a long time to come. So let's give an indulgence score overall of about 8.5 on 10 for the whole trip. Let's talk about places that we visited on this trip. Well, we started off, as you know, from Surat, and now we've ended up in Diu. So let's quickly talk about Diu for a second before I move on to the other places. I've never visited Diu before because I've never felt the need to. I'm not much of a traveler. Coming here now for the first time though has changed my mind about it. It is a very pretty place, very quaint and very clean. Will I visit the city again? Yes, of course, as a tourist, probably to take in the local sights and the local cuisine. That said, the big places we visited this time around were the ferry terminal in Godha and the shipbreaking yards at Alang. Now, the ferry terminal, for example, is a very important part of this trip because that's what we intended to do in the first place. That said, it isn't actually active just yet. They are taking passengers, they aren't taking cars. Cars will be active in about January end or February early, and they're going to take 300 cars and 150 trucks at the same time on each journey. Now, Dzire has been a faithful companion across the last couple of days. It has been with us through the thick and thin of things, and it has taken all those non-existent roads on, my aggressive driving and my extremely heavy right foot. And it has come out all of this with not a single scratch or dent, or not a complaint, not a murmur, not even a little whisper of complaint. Now, let's talk about the car. It is the best subcompact sedan that you can buy in India today. That's a known fact. It does have a diesel engine and a petrol engine. It's got a manual or an automatic like the one we have here today. And it's got an interior with packed features. That said, should we give the car a score? Well, it is a benchmark in its segment. And therefore it deserves a 10 on 10, doesn't it? So that brings us to an end, officially, to our little trip. Remember, it's been all fun and games. It's been a great trip, but safety is also key. So as always, do remember to wear your seatbelts and have a safe drive.